Evelyn Turner lived alone in a little white house at the edge of Portland. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where every sound, from the ticking clock on the mantel to the whisper of the wind through the garden trees, reminded her of how quiet life had become. Once her days were filled with laughter, with the deep voice of her husband Jack calling from the porch, "Ah!" and the chatter of her son running through the hallway. Now, the only voices that echoed were from the radio or the memories in her mind. Jack had passed away 10 years ago, and though Evelyn had learned to live with that absence, some days still felt heavy. She tried to keep herself busy, tending her garden, baking bread, reading old novels, but there was a certain silence that no activity could fill. Her son David lived several hours away in Seattle with his own family. He called every week, but life kept him busy and Evelyn never wanted to bother him. She always told herself she was fine. Even when loneliness crept in like the evening fog. One Friday morning, as she was watering her plants, her phone rang. When she saw the name Ethan flash across the screen, her face lit up instantly. Ethan was her grandson, David's boy, and she hadn't seen him properly in nearly 2 years. He was 21 now, studying architecture in college. Every time she spoke to him, she could hear the rush of life in his background, people talking, car horns, the energy of youth. He sounded so full of dreams, so alive. "Grandma," his cheerful voice came through the phone. "Mind if I visit for the weekend?" Evelyn's heart jumped. Oh, Ethan, of course. It's been too long. "I need a break," he said with a laugh. "College is exhausting and I miss your cooking." That simple sentence warmed her in a way nothing else could. She spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, preparing his favorite dishes, and setting out fresh sheets in the guest room. It felt good to have a reason to fuss again, to bring a spark of life back into the rooms that had been quiet for too long. By evening, the sky turned gray and soft rain began to fall. When Ethan finally arrived, stepping out of his car with a backpack slung over his shoulder, Evelyn could hardly believe how grown up he looked. His face had matured, but his eyes, warm brown and full of kindness, were the same. He hugged her tightly, and she held on longer than she meant to. "You've gotten taller," she teased, trying to keep her voice steady. "And you've gotten shorter," he joked, smiling wide. They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like time folded in on itself. The years melted away, and they were simply grandmother and grandson again. Inside, the air smelled of roasted chicken and cinnamon pie. Ethan immediately noticed how tidy the house was. Though he could see traces of age, fading wallpaper, an old armchair by the window, and family photos that seemed to tell a whole history. "Everything's the same," he said, glancing around. "Some things shouldn't change." Evelyn replied softly. Placing a plate of food in front of him, they ate together, talking about his classes, his new apartment, and his plans after graduation. Evelyn listened carefully, asking questions, genuinely curious about every detail. She loved hearing his excitement, the way he talked about designing homes, creating spaces where people could feel connected. It reminded her of Jack, who had built their house by hand when they first married. After dinner, they watched an old movie from Evelyn's collection, one she and Jack used to love. The black and white film flickered on the screen, and though the story was simple, it carried a kind of charm that made the evening feel timeless. Ethan sat beside her, occasionally glancing her way when she laughed at an old-fashioned line. There was warmth in that moment, quiet, steady warmth. When the movie ended, the rain had turned into a steady rhythm against the windows. Ethan looked thoughtful, almost distant. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the soft glow of the fireplace. "Grandma," he said suddenly, his tone softer now, "can we talk later? About something important?" The question caught her off guard. She studied his face, trying to read what he meant. But his expression was calm, serious, but not troubled. "Of course, dear," she replied gently. "Whenever you're ready." He nodded, but didn't say more. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried a quiet weight. Evelyn could feel it, a sense that he had something deep on his mind, something personal. She didn't press him. She had learned long ago that sometimes people needed space before they could speak from the heart. Later that night, when she went to her room, She couldn't sleep right away. She lay there, listening to the rain and thinking about Ethan. She remembered him as a little boy, running barefoot through the yard, hiding behind Jack's legs, laughing so loudly that it filled the whole house. Those days felt so far away now. It touched her how kind and gentle he had become, how thoughtful. There was something about his visit that felt different this time, as if he wasn't just stopping by to say hello. But searching for something more, she glanced at the photo on her nightstand, her and Jack on their wedding day. His arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling with the certainty of young love. She whispered quietly into the dark, "You'd be proud of him, Jack." The house creaked softly as the wind brushed against the windows. Down the hallway she could hear Ethan moving, maybe making tea, maybe lost in thought like she was. She smiled to herself, grateful he was there in that quiet hour. She felt something stir inside her, not sadness, but peace. It had been so long since anyone had filled her home with conversation, laughter, and warmth. She didn't know what Ethan wanted to talk about, but she sensed it mattered to him. Before closing her eyes, she said a small prayer, hoping that, whatever he needed to say, she'd have the right words to comfort him. Because that was what she had always been, a listener, a quiet space where people could be themselves without fear. As the rain continued to fall, Evelyn drifted to sleep with a faint smile. She didn't know it yet, but that simple weekend visit, the one that began with a phone call and a plate of roasted walls, would soon become one of the most unforgettable moments of her life. When morning came, sunlight peeked through the curtains. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Ethan was already awake, sitting by the window with his notebook open, sketching something. Evelyn watched him from the doorway for a moment, the quiet focus in his eyes, the gentle rhythm of his pencil moving across the page. Something about that sight made her heart ache in a tender way. Time was moving, life was changing, but love in all its forms still lived quietly in her home. And deep down, Evelyn knew the conversation Ethan wanted to have would change not only his heart, but hers as well. The next morning brought a calm brightness that seemed to wash away the grayness of the night before. The air was crisp, and the garden outside glistened with dew. Evelyn moved quietly through the kitchen, her slippers brushing against the floor as she prepared breakfast. She could hear Ethan humming softly in the living room, a low, thoughtful tune that reminded her of how Jack used to hum when he was fixing something. The sound filled her with warmth. When she brought out the tray of eggs, toast, and coffee, Ethan was already sitting at the kitchen table with his sketchbook open. He looked up and smiled, his eyes lighting up with the same easy kindness that always melted her heart. "Morning, Grandma," he said. "Good morning, sweetheart," she replied, setting the food down. "You're up early for someone on vacation," he chuckled. "I couldn't sleep much. Your house is so quiet compared to the city. I think I'm not used to the silence." Evelyn smiled knowingly. "It's peaceful here. But yes, silence can be loud when you're used to noise." They ate together in companionable quiet for a few minutes. The soft ticking of the clock and the faint chirping of birds were the only sounds. Evelyn noticed Ethan's sketchbook again, a drawing of a small house by a lake, shaded carefully with pencil. "That's beautiful," she said. "Is it one of your projects?" He nodded, kind of. "It's something I've been designing for a while, a small retreat cabin. I think people need places to breathe, you know? Away from screens and chaos. I want to build something that feels like home." Evelyn's eyes softened. "That sounds wonderful. You always had an eye for beauty, even as a child." Psh. Ethan smiled, but looked a bit distant, as if his mind was elsewhere. Then, almost hesitantly, he said, "Grandma, can I ask you something personal?" She raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. "You can ask me anything, Ethan. You know that." He took a slow breath, gathering his words. "When Grandpa died, how did you handle being alone?" The question caught her off guard. She wasn't expecting him to bring that up. She set down her coffee cup and looked at him carefully. His tone wasn't casual. It carried weight, sincerity. She thought for a moment before answering. "At first, I didn't handle it at all," she said quietly. I tried to fill the silence, gardening, volunteering, calling people, pretending I was fine. But grief doesn't go away because you keep busy. It lingers until you face it. Eventually, I realized the only way to live again was to make peace with being alone. Ethan nodded slowly. Was it hard to find peace? It took years, she admitted, but it came little by little. One morning I woke up and realized I wasn't crying anymore. I still missed him. I always will, but it stopped hurting every second of the day. I began to remember the love more than the loss. For a moment, they just sat there in silence. Ethan's gaze was steady. Okay, but she could see the storm of emotions behind his calm expression. He finally said, "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Ah! Evelyn's heart tightened. About love. He nodded, sort of. About life. About what happens when things change faster than you expect. She leaned in gently. "Tell me, dear. Whatever it is, you can trust me." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, hesitating as though he wasn't sure how to start. "It's just, lately I've been confused about where I'm headed, about what I want. I've been studying so hard, working nonstop, trying to make everyone proud. But when I look around, I feel empty sometimes, like I'm chasing something that doesn't even belong to me." Evelyn listened without interrupting, her heart swelling with both pride and concern. "You sound like someone trying to figure out what truly matters. That's not a bad thing," he sighed. "I guess, but there's more. I've been helping a friend lately, someone older going through a hard time, and she told me that I remind her of her late husband. It made me think about how people hold on to the past and how hard it is to let go." Evelyn watched his face as he spoke. There was depth in his voice now, a kind of emotional maturity that surprised her. "So that's what's been on your mind?" She asked softly. "You're wondering about love, about loss, about how people move forward?" He nodded, his expression serious. "Exactly. I guess I'm afraid of losing people or not saying the right things before it's too late." Her eyes glistened with understanding. "Oh, Ethan, that's something everyone fears, no matter how old they are. But the best thing you can do is love people fully while they're here. Don't hold back kindness. Don't hold back honesty." He smiled faintly. "That's good advice. I think I needed to hear that." They sat for a while after that, sipping their coffee as sunlight streamed across the table. The moment felt delicate, like a bridge between generations to people from different worlds, connected by shared feelings. Then Evelyn said something that surprised even herself. "You know, Ethan, maybe you came here for more than a visit. Maybe you came here to find a piece of yourself." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Maybe I did." The rest of the day flowed easily between them. They took a walk through the garden where Evelyn showed him the rose bushes she had planted after Jack's passing. "They remind me that life grows even after loss," she said. Ethan took a photo of her standing beside them, sunlight touching her silver hair, and smiled quietly. Later, they drove to the lake outside town. It was a place Evelyn hadn't been in years, but she wanted to show Ethan where she and Jack used to sit during summer evenings. The drive was peaceful, the road winding through tall trees. When they arrived, the water shimmered under the sunlight. They sat on a wooden bench near the shore. The air smelled of pine and earth. "Grandma," Ethan said after a while, "thank you for talking with me this morning. I don't think I've ever had such an honest conversation before." She smiled. "It's good for the soul to speak truth. It's even better to listen." He looked out at the water. "I think I'm learning both." There was something quietly transformative about that afternoon. For Evelyn, it was the first time in a long while that she felt needed in a deeper way, not as someone to take care of, but as someone whose wisdom mattered. For Ethan, it was like rediscovering what family meant: connection, patience, understanding. As they watched the ripples on the lake, Ethan said softly, "You know, I thought I came here to take a break, but maybe I came here to learn what peace looks like." Evelyn chuckled gently. "Peace isn't a place, Ethan. It's a state of heart. And you'll find it. Just don't rush it." They sat in silence, the golden light settling around them. Neither needed to say more. The bond between them, one built on love, memory, and quiet understanding, spoke louder than words ever could. That night, as they returned home, Ethan looked at his grandmother differently. Not just as the sweet woman who baked his favorite pie and told old stories, but as someone who had lived, lost, and found meaning again. And though Evelyn didn't know it yet, Ethan was about to share something the next day that would truly leave her speechless, something that would make her see how deeply her quiet wisdom had touched his life. The next morning started with a quiet drizzle. The sky was pale gray and raindrops tapped gently against the kitchen windows. Evelyn was already awake, humming softly as she made tea. The calm rhythm of her small world felt comforting after the emotional conversations of the past days. But something about the morning felt different, warmer, filled with a quiet expectation she couldn't name. Ethan came downstairs soon after, still in his sweatshirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy. He smiled at her, a calm, thoughtful smile that seemed to carry the weight of something unsaid. "Morning, Grandma," he said softly. "Good morning, dear," she replied, pouring tea into 2 cups. "Sleep well," he nodded. "Better than I have in weeks. I guess this house feels like a reset button." She smiled, sliding a cup toward him. "That's what home does. It reminds you of who you are." They sat across from each other, the rain outside setting a soothing rhythm. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something, but he hesitated, glancing at his phone before sliding it into his pocket. Evelyn noticed his unease. "Something on your mind?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then said, "Actually, yes. I've been thinking about everything we talked about yesterday, about peace, about living honestly, about not waiting too long to say what matters." Evelyn's brow softened. "Go on." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "I realized that I've been living on autopilot for too long. Studying, working, chasing deadlines. But I forgot to live. And being here with Yuri minded me what it feels like to breathe again." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "Oh, Ethan, you don't have to say that. You're young. You have time to figure things out." He shook his head. "No, Grandma, mean it. You've taught me something these past few days. I've been so afraid of losing control, of failing people, that I stopped appreciating the simple things like mornings like this. The way you sit here, calm, present, at peace. That's what I want." Smiled warmly. "Then you're already halfway there. Awareness is the first step to change." Ethan looked down for a moment, fiddling with something in his pocket. Then, taking a breath, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box. It was tied with a simple white ribbon. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "What's this?" He smiled shyly. "A gift. I was going to wait, but I think now's the right time." She laughed softly. "You didn't have to bring me anything, Ethan." "Ethan, I know," he said. "But I wanted to. It's something special." With a curious expression, she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a delicate silver locket. The design was old-fashioned, simple, elegant, timeless. She opened it carefully and gasped softly. Inside were 2 small photographs, one of her and Jack on their wedding day, and one of her and Ethan from years ago when he was just a little boy sitting on her lap, grinning at the camera. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled as she looked at the locket, then at Ethan. "How did you wear? Did you find this photo?" Ethan smiled. "Dad had some old family albums in the attic. I took one picture of you and Grandpa and another of us. I wanted to remind you and myself that love doesn't disappear. It just changes form." Evelyn pressed the locket to her chest, unable to speak for a moment. "Ethan, this is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. "You've given me a lot more, Grandma. You've given me understanding. You've shown me that strength doesn't mean shutting down your heart." Okay. She smiled through tears. "Oh, Ethan, you have no idea how proud that makes me." The rain had softened into a gentle mist outside. The air in the kitchen felt warm, filled with quiet emotion. Evelyn looked at him, the young man her little boy had become, and realized that the gift wasn't just the locket. It was the connection, the closeness they had rebuilt after years of distance. After breakfast, Ethan suggested they go for a drive. "There's something I want to show you," he said. They drove through the winding country roads, the rain easing as patches of sunlight began to peek through the clouds. The world outside glistened, green and alive. Ethan stopped the car near a hill overlooking a wide field and a small stream. Evelyn stepped out, breathing in the fresh air. "Oh, this place. I remember coming here with your grandfather years ago." Ethan nodded. "I thought you might. I found it while hiking last summer. It's peaceful here. I wanted you to see it again." They walked a short path down to a wooden bench near the stream. The water shimmered under the sunlight, and birds chirped from the trees. Evelyn sat, the breeze lifting strands of her silver hair. Ethan sat beside her quietly, letting the silence stretch. Finally, he spoke. "Grandma, I've decided something. I'm going to take a break from work for a while. Maybe travel, maybe stay somewhere quiet. I want to live differently, simpler, more intentionally, like you taught me." Evelyn looked at him in disbelief. "You'd leave your job?" He nodded. "Just for a while. I've saved enough to manage. I don't want to wake up one day and realize I've missed life." Her heart swelled with pride. "That's a brave decision, Ethan. Most people never find the courage to listen to their heart." He smiled softly. "You gave me that courage." They sat together, watching the water move gently over the rocks. The air smelled of rain and earth. Evelyn thought about the years she had spent holding on to memories, afraid to let herself dream again. Yet here she was, feeling alive, feeling hopeful because of one heartfelt conversation. One visit that had changed everything. Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out his sketchbook again. "Do you mind if I draw this?" She smiled. "Not at all. I'd love that." As he began sketching the scene, the stream, the bench, and Evelyn sitting beside him, she watched quietly, her heart full. Every stroke of his pencil seemed to capture not just the view, but the moment itself, the unspoken love between them. When he finished, he turned the sketchbook toward her. "What do you think?" She looked at it and smiled. "It's beautiful, Ethan. You've captured something real here. Not just what it looks like, but what it feels like." He grinned. "That's the best compliment I could get." They stayed there until the sun began to lower behind the trees. As they got up to leave, Evelyn looked around one last time. "Your grandfather would have loved to see this again," she said softly. Ethan slipped his arm around her shoulder, gentle and reassuring. "He's here, Grandma. Every time you remember him, every time you tell his stories, he's with you." She leaned into him slightly, comforted by his words. "You've grown into such a kind man, Ethan. You remind me of him more than you know." He smiled quietly. "That means everything to me." On the drive back home, neither said much. They didn't need to. The silence between them was peaceful, full of understanding. Evelyn turned the locket over in her hand, tracing the tiny photographs with her thumb. That night, before bed, she placed the locket on her nightstand beside Jack's old photo. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Instead, she felt surrounded by love past and present as she drifted to sleep. She realized something profound. Sometimes, life gives you gifts wrapped not in paper, but in people who bring you back to yourself, and in the quiet of that realization, Evelyn smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The night was calm. The kind of quiet that felt almost sacred. A faint golden glow from the living room lamp softened the shadows, and the sound of the ticking clock filled the silence. Evelyn sat in her armchair, the silver locket resting against her chest. It had been 2 days since Ethan gave it to her, and somehow everything around her seemed brighter, her garden, her laughter. Even the air inside her small home. Ethan was upstairs packing. He had decided to leave the next morning for a trip he'd been dreaming about for years. He wanted to explore small towns, meet people, and sketch the places that made him feel alive. Evelyn was proud of him, though her heart felt heavy. The house had been so full of warmth since he came, and she wasn't ready for it to be quiet again. When he came downstairs, he found her staring at the old photo of his grandfather. "You look lost in thought," Ethan said softly, sitting beside her. She smiled gently. "Just thinking how quickly time moves. It feels like yesterday you were a little boy running around this house asking me to bake you cookies," he chuckled. "You always made them better than anyone else." They both laughed, then fell into a peaceful silence, the kind where words weren't needed. The clock ticked on, marking the rhythm of two lives bound by love and memory. After a moment, Ethan spoke, his tone quieter now. "Grandma, there's something I never told you." Evelyn looked at him with curiosity. "What is it, dear?" He hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the coffee cup. "I was going through a rough time before I came here. I didn't tell anyone. I felt lost, empty, like nothing I did mattered. I came here because I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe being around you would remind me of what really matters." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "Oh, Ethan." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "And it worked. You helped me find my purpose again. You reminded me of love, of home, of how to slow down and live. You probably don't realize it, but you saved me." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to hold his hand. "You saved yourself, Ethan. You just needed a place to remember who you are." He squeezed her hand. "Maybe, but you gave me that place. You gave me peace." For a long while, neither spoke. The sound of rain began to patter lightly against the windows again, just as it had on the night he first arrived. It felt like the world itself was echoing their emotions, soft, reflective, and alive. Evelyn finally said, "Your grandfather used to say that life is a circle. We pass on what we've learned to those who come after us, and in that way we never really leave." Ethan nodded, his voice low. "Then he's still here with both of us." They sat together for a long time, watching the rain, sharing stories about the past. She told him about how she met Jack, how nervous he was on their first date, how they built this house together with their own hands. Ethan listened like every word was precious. After a while, he said, "You know, Grandma, I used to think love was only about big gestures, flowers, surprises, grand confessions. But watching you talk about Grandpa, I think love is more about being there, quietly, steadily." Evelyn smiled. "You're right. It's in the quiet moments, the morning tea, the small kindnesses, the forgiveness that doesn't need words. That's the kind of love that lasts." Ethan leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "I hope I can find something like that one day." She looked at him warmly. "You will, but don't rush it. The right person will find you when your heart is ready." The night deepened, and soon the rain stopped. A thin silver moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Evelyn got up slowly and went to the small wooden box on the shelf. Inside were letters, some from her husband, others from friends long gone. She pulled out one envelope, yellowed by time, and handed it to Ethan. "This," she said, "was the last letter your grandfather wrote me before he passed. I want you to read it." Ethan carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky, but full of love. "My dear Evelyn, if you're reading this, I hope you're smiling. Life has been good to us, hasn't it? Even in its quiet moments, it's been a song. If I'm gone, don't let the silence feel empty. Fill it with laughter, with stories, with love. Promise me you'll keep living, not just existing. You were always my heart. And one day, when you look at the stars, remember, I'm there watching over you." Ethan finished reading with tears in his eyes. Evelyn was already crying softly, her hand pressed to her lips. "He really loved you," Ethan whispered. "He did," she replied, "and I still love him every single day. But love changes, it doesn't fade. It grows quieter, deeper, and becomes part of who you are." Ethan folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "He'd be proud of you, Grandma. And I think he'd be proud of me, too." She smiled, her eyes shining. "He would. You've become a good man." The clock struck midnight. The house was still wrapped in a kind of peace that only comes after truth has been spoken. Ethan stood up, walked over to the window, and looked outside. "You know," he said softly, I used to be scared of getting older, scared of losing people, but now I think it's just another way life keeps teaching us to love. Evelyn joined him by the window. That's the secret, she said. Life keeps breaking and mending us so we learn how to love better. They stood together in silence, watching the moonlight glimmer on the wet leaves. Then Ethan turned to her and smiled. Thank you, Grandma, for everything. For reminding me that love doesn't always need to be loud, just needs to be real. Evelyn reached up and gently touched his cheek. You'll do great things, Ethan. Not because you're perfect, but because your heart is kind. That's what this world needs. He hugged her tightly, a long embrace that spoke more than words could. I'll call you from the road, he said. You'd better, she teased, smiling through tears. The next morning, when the sun rose and painted the sky in gold and pink, Ethan's car disappeared down the long country road. Evelyn watched from the porch, waving until he was gone from sight. She felt a mix of sadness and pride, her heart full, not empty. Later, she sat by the window, the locket resting over her heart. She opened it one more time, the photo of her husband, the photo of her grandson, and whispered, Thank you, Jack. He's everything I could have hoped for. Outside, a bird began to sing, and for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel the ache of loneliness. She felt surrounded by love, by memory, by hope. She smiled, picked up Ethan's sketch of the two of them by the stream, and placed it on the mantel beside Jack's photo. A perfect circle of love, past, present, and future. And in that quiet house, filled with warmth and light, Evelyn whispered softly, Love never leaves. It just changes shape.